Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to another DM's Guild review, my written and video review series where I take a look at the adventures and supplemental material at the Dungeon Masters Guild website. This video will be reviewing the DM's Guild adventure Songs of Aedragard by Fernando A. Dolande for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Review copy has been provided for the purposes of this review. If you enjoy my videos, consider using my affiliate links for your DM's Guild shopping and supporting me via patreon.com/roguewatson. Shoutouts to my platinum patrons Andrew, Richard, Joe, Will, Tiny Dancer, Nick, Andy, and Chris, and gold patrons RPG Papercrafts, Charming Grenade, Pretty Boy, Numa, Marcos de Vicente, Gilberto, Shane K, Cert 2B, Adam, Dead Lizard Lounge, Sam, Rosh, Limpus Buds, and Jerome. Thank you all very much for your support. Songs of Aedragard is a level 1 adventure, and I am incredibly impressed by its layout, its organization, although the first chapter is better organized than the latter 2 chapters. It it could serve as a better springboard for any of the major campaigns, or it could serve as a very low level side quest, because you could probably shift it to level 1 or 2 or 3 without too much trouble. It's very role-playing heavy, role-playing and exploration and combat light, which is a lot different than most D&D adventures that I look at, because let's face it, D&D is still a game primarily built for combat. Nearly all of the characters' mechanics and everything have to do with fighting monsters. It's a big part of it. The name of the game is Dungeons and Dragons. You're usually not, sitting down to tea with your dragons and cleaning out dungeons. You're exploring them, you're getting loot, and you're fighting things. So I think it's a lot different than what a lot of D&D players would expect, but I think that's all. I think it's complementary because it's written very well. It tells a good story, and I think it flips a lot of those tropes around because you end up meeting a lot of creatures and NPCs that you would normally battle, like a tribe of kobolds or an ogre or a bunch of ghosts, and instead you can have role-playing encounters with all of those things. I think you can make it through this entire adventure without having a single battle. Now, that doesn't mean you don't have to, because the way it's organized is there's a really cool flowchart in chapter 1 that lets you basically, as the DM, make sure that there's a balance of exploration and combat and role playing throughout the random encounters in the Crypt Garden Forest. So the story is your players get a mission from a benefactor who is hiring them to go clear out this old castle that once belonged to their family. It's in the middle of the forest, and of course, it's a scary ruin. So they hire some, low-B red shirt adventurers to go explore, and that's where the players come in. And then chapter 1 is a really, really fun flowchart of events broken up by scenes. Before we get there, I can go over the organization, which is very well done. The formatting, the layout is incredibly attractive. There's artwork on, I think, every single page or almost every page. I really love the way this has a book-like quality with the kind of like borders on the top and bottom. The green looks really good. The fact that we get these nice little there's quotes, there's lines and headings. It's all of that is very, very attractive. I love that. It has a dramatis personae, which includes all of the major NPCs, including allies and villains. And there's a ton of NPCs in this adventure, as well as a dramatis loci. It's the location version of a dramatis personae, which includes notes on the locations that the party will be in, including using those 5-word descriptors, which I love for players to do for their characters in locations, which is really cool to see. So really, really fun way to kick it off. And of course, it's got the adventure summary in the background and the adventure hook, which the adventure hook is probably the weakest part of this adventure. A lot of, especially if you're looking at like Adventurers League style adventures, Act 1 is always just get the mission and, players get a chance to buy things or converse with the quest giver and all that. This one actually kind of fast forwards through all of that and puts them already at the start of the Crypt Garden Forest. You're already there. You've already gotten the mission, which is interesting because it is, that would almost feel like, okay, I guess it's not going to be much role playing because we don't get one of those few usual role playing moments, which is the quest giving NPC and a chance to chat about and learn about what's going on. But in this case, it skips, I think, past that because it's such a role playing heavy module. You don't really even need that extra bit at the beginning. You're about to be embarked on a hugely role playing focused adventure. So I was actually okay with it generally kind of skipping what is usually the first chapter in an adventure and instead just putting us right in the Crypt Garden Forest, which is right here. Now, this is a really, really impressive structure. It is organized by scene, and as you can see, depending on, it's almost like a choose an adventure book. Um, how the players react to events in each scene determines what the next scene is. And I think the idea here is the author has tried to divide it so that they meet the same number of like friendly NPCs and the same number of just exploration scenes and the same number of potential combat encounters. I think is the general idea here, including the fact where if they keep on running away from things, they eventually get ambushed by a freaking wormling with a bunch of wolves. So as a punishment, I guess. Like one of them, there's an abandoned village where they have to fight a giant spider, but they could potentially get a lot of loot, or they could meet this like dwarven robot that they would have to roll some pretty high skill checks on to figure out what it's all about. But then they could activate it and actually gain this pretty cool like robotic ally. Or you can meet a wounded NPC dwarf who is on her way to explore the ruins because she's got her story tied to one of the ghosts there. It's actually her father that passed and is still a ghost there. So you can help her, heal her, and have her join the party. There's a lot of really cool events, and I just love the way that it's all like a crazy flowchart of different things that can happen. This is exactly how I want all of my RPG chapters to be organized. This is a wonderful compromise between like a JRPG style that's like very fun but very linear. Generally, you're going from one area to the next, versus like an open world Western RPG, which is like a Skyrim or something, which is just fuck all. You can go anywhere you want, even ignore the main quest kind of a thing. And both of those have their advantages and disadvantages. And with tabletop RPGs, generally the open world one is a complete nightmare for planning. And as somebody who plays like me with Roll20, it's kind of impossible to even do it that way because I have to have like maps and tokens set up. But then you don't want to be too railroady. So I do like that this is a happy medium, which is you create, and this is also better than just having like a D10 table of just one line things like, hey, they get to the next scene, roll a dice, oh, you're attacked by wolves. That's not. Yes, that fills up the time and that provides combat, but doesn't really do anything. Whereas here, like the wolves happen to be this wolf pack from the wormling, I forgot, Razorwing, I think, which is a daughter of the green dragon who rules over the Crypt Garden Forest, and she's using her illusion magic to be like a wolf-like leader. And it's all of that is really, really cool. And there's an ogre shepherd the party can find who's actually pretty friendly, which is, again, that twist of like you meet monsters, but they're actually more than meets the eye, which I really love. And that's a great trope to work with. And he, of course, doesn't trust a lot of people, but if you're nice to him, then he can definitely help the players and even become a potential ally and lead players to the ruins they're trying to get to. So it's a really fun way of providing scripted encounters, but also giving the players choice because but depending on the things that they do, if they engage with the thing or not engage, then you can say, okay, well, since they have this ally, I'm not going to add this ally. Instead, I'm going to have them go to this scene where they'll maybe fight the giant spider. Or in the case of like, oh man, they really fought those wolves, let's have them go here and have just a kind of exploration role playing scene. And then we'll go here and I'll introduce an ally. That's a really cool system that I don't think I've really seen much of in adventures. So I cannot praise this enough. I think it's awesome. Now, that works really well for a random encounter chapter, which is what this is. They're just trying to get through the Crypt Garden Forest and get to the castle, which is a great way of ticking off those boxes of, okay, I want to have like 3 or 4 encounters on the way. It doesn't work quite as well when we get into the castle itself. So I already pretty much went over these. So I'm going to kind of skip by chapter 1, but you can see there's artwork on every page. There's a really nice chat box of descriptive text that you're supposed to read. And it's that perfect length of not too long, not too long-winded, but gives enough evocative language to set the scene. Very, very well done. When we get to the actual dungeon, however, it does that same scene organization, but instead of having a flowchart, it just lists the locations here on the map, but then it doesn't list the locations again for the scene. So it does the same scene organization as chapter 1 did, but chapter 1 didn't have locations. You were just going literally from scene to scene in this nebulous, forest region. Whereas here we're actually on a battle map, presumably. Because we've got the map here, which unfortunately it is a Dyson logo style map. I personally dislike this map style so much so that it's always going to be a negative for me on any adventure that uses it. Because I think it would be really awesome to have a full-fledged battle map here. Although I will say, because it's not very combat heavy, that's less egregious than ones that are more combat heavy. But the problem is, it gets a little bit more confusing to keep track of where each scene happens, because you have to keep referring back to this page, which says, Miss Woolly's hideout, reeking of burnt oil. This tower is the home of a boogie. Scene 11 happens here. So instead of having it be area 6 in this chapter, you have to skip to like, okay, where's scene 11? And then read that. And then, okay, where does scene 11 happen? You have to go back to area 6. It's just needlessly confusing. So as much as I like the scene organization in chapter 1, Chapter 2 really should have been organized by location. There's a reason that all dungeons are organized by location, because it's already annotated here as if it should be organized by location. So I still like the idea of you breaking it up into scenes, but it needs to be organized by location. Instead of scene 7, the gates of Aedragard, this should have been area 1, the broken gates. Or just, if you want to have the scene titled something for whatever reason, then you can have it under, say, this happens at area 1 of the dungeon. That is something that is a bummer, because it worked so well in chapter 2, and unfortunately it is a detriment in chapters 2 and 3, because the dungeon crawl doesn't lend itself to just being broken up into scenes. It needs to be organized by location. This dungeon is, I believe, almost entirely combat free. In fact, I think it is combat free. It is literally just a bunch of exploration and role-playing scenes. In fact, what's really nice organization is it says up in the header, I'm pointing, but you can't see my hand right there. It says role-play scene, exploration scene, role-play scene. That's really helpful for an at-a-glance for the DM. Again, I absolutely love the layout that's included here in terms of the font size, the way it just looks with all the artwork and the banners and everything, the colors that are being used, the descriptive text box. All of that is awesome, and especially to have that as a subheader. And this entire top side of the castle is just a whole bunch of exploration. There's no combat whatsoever, which is nuts, because a lot of dungeons in a haunted, ruined castle would be full of monsters to fight. And this adventure really almost swings the pendulum too hard the other way and doesn't include any combat. And like I said, you can easily make it through the forest without any combat, to where if I was running this, I would probably insert a random in combat encounter or two, which is pretty nuts, because I usually don't ever have to do that, because we usually have plenty of combat in these adventures. But this one is actually so low on combat, I would probably add in some swarm of bugs or giant rats or just some bullshit thing in there. Now, granted, it is designed for level 1. The odd thing is, and the author mentions it can be used as a side quest for other campaigns. Because it takes place in Cryptgarden Forest, so it works perfectly with Phandelver or Icespire Peak or Prince of the Apocalypse. A lot of the regional stuff happens right there. But the milestone XP says level 1, Cryptgarden Forest, level 2, the topside ruins, and then level 3, the bottom side ruins. There's not nearly enough content here, I don't think, to justify that amount of leveling, unless you really are trying to boost your players up to that tier 2 as quickly as possible. So I did have a problem with the milestone leveling not fitting what I thought the content would justify it for that, especially if you're going to use it as a side quest. Then, well, the advantage is, because it's more role-playing heavy, you can use it as a side quest without having to actually tweak any of the things too much, because most of the skill checks are still pretty fine. There's actually some DC even close to 20s are supposed to be really difficult, and DC 10 for easy and 15 for medium. So I think it would actually scale pretty well for anywhere in tier 1, and really only with a few adjustments, even for maybe lower tier 2, which is very advantageous. Level 1, it might actually be pretty hard. In fact, there's that one scene where you literally fight that green dragon wormling that I think pretty much would wipe a party of level 1s unless they immediately pull back, which I guess that scene is designed to kind of punish players who are already not doing the forest part of the adventure very well. Eventually, they find their way into the bottom part of this dungeon, and this dungeon has a very cool back history to it, where this bard basically sold its soul to this ancient artifact and turned everyone inside into ghosts after it was already destroyed by this rampaging dragon. So essentially, there's a bunch of ghosts trapped in this area, and the players have to then decide to help them. And it really isn't a spooky haunted castle in the way that haunted castles typically are, especially in a fantasy RPG. Again, you expect to fight ghosts and zombies and skeletons and all that. This doesn't have any of that. There's nothing topside, basically. There's just kind of the ruins that you find. And then the bottom side, which is where everybody was caught and killed, or trapped, I guess, is where you find a bunch of ghosts and none of them are hostile. They're all just trying to like do their thing. There's like the dwarf guy who's just waiting on medicine for his sick wife, and of course he's a ghost. And then there's the doctor who's trying to get the medicine together, and she's a ghost. And you're just trying to help all these people. They're just or help the ghosts really. There's the one bard who's the antagonist who's trying to keep everybody in ghost form because he doesn't want to move on. And even then, the players aren't really meant to fight him, except for the end that can happen. There's a little ghost girl that runs around that you can play tag with, and it's a bunch of skill checks and everything. So I was floored by the fact that even we get down here and we're still not in combat mode yet. We're just walking around, exploring the area, learning about its history, and hopefully helping these ghosts. Although it does mention, and there's a really nice notes about role playing with how to do conversations. It's all the way back here in the beginning. For new rules for conversations, the golden rule is basically that almost no NPC will. The only thing that'll fight the NPC or fight the players without warning is the wolves. But everybody else requires the players to actually make the first move for combat, in which case combat will happen. So always give them that option. But otherwise, every single NPC in here has desires, wants, and needs, and the players can use insight checks to discover what they are, and then that lets them potentially, complete their quests or gain them as allies or whatever else. So that works really, really well, especially for players who are more inclined to do role playing and want to get involved in conversations and different NPC stories versus just pulling out the sword and immediately fighting everybody. So your group, if they would like that kind of thing or not. I think if they do like that kind of thing, or if they want to try their hand at doing that kind of thing, this would be an excellent adventure for that, because it is very, very heavy on the role playing and the storytelling part. The end of it, you eventually, if you are helping these ghosts, you learn that there's a festival you can perform, which is a group skill check at the end, which is usually a tricky thing to do. As a part of, I believe, 4th edition D&D. In fact, I reviewed a product that was all about these skill challenges, is what they're called. And you have to complete 5 successes before accruing a certain amount of failures. And in this case, you can either do cooking, dancing, or performing music, which are all kinds of different checks. I love that you can dance using either athletics, acrobatics, or performance. That's really fun. So it gives the players a chance to do this big climax, which is not a boss battle. It's just a bunch of skill challenges. If they've got NPCs, the NPCs that they've earned along the way can help them, which is really cool. And then if you succeed, then you literally just basically save all the ghosts, and that's the end of the story. If you fail, but you tried at doing this, then you get the boss fight with the final evil ghost bard, and he summons a bunch of flying swords, and it's a nice little boss fight. Or you can just kill all the ghosts if you want. Again, it's impressive that this module preemptively is prepared for players to just basically not engage with anything and kill everything. In which case, I think this would be a fairly disappointing module. But I'm impressed that it did prepare for that, and it ends up with a much darker but still successful adventure in the end, which is certainly something you can do. Or of course, and that's the midnight ending, or the dusk ending, which is all the players die and they become trapped forever in the haunted castle. Really, really good endings, though. Great epilogue. I love that the companions are given an epilogue, as if it was like a Fallout or Dragon Age or something game, where you can see where all your companions go, assuming you earn some of them in the forest, which is really, really cool. So I was very impressed. Tons of stat blocks that are provided at the end, which is nice to see. We get new magic items. The actually entire Dark Heart Crystal, which is the big evil thing at the heart of this, which never really comes up, and you don't even barely learn about it in the adventure. In the context of this adventure, is still given a full 2-page artifact description, which is pretty nuts. I was also very impressed with the fact that this module can be integrated into other adventures, because it takes place in the Cryptgarden Forest, which is right there, as I mentioned, next to adventures like Phandelver and Prince of the Apocalypse. Can be integrated into some of these adventures, or even used in other ways. And it, again, preemptively says, as much as and this is the author, as much as I would like to see people run this adventure as is, I also understand that a lot of DMs, they pick and pull from different elements or aspects or areas of an adventure to incorporate into their campaigns, and then add their own flavoring. That's part of the joy of of being a DM and using this kind of stuff. And one thing you can do is you can put the castle on an island or put it on a mountain or in the desert or somewhere. And it even gives options for using all these different things or reskinning the dungeon in other ways, which is really impressive because obviously a lot of adventures, they kind of just assume that, it's like, hey, here's my thing. And obviously you can do whatever you want with it. But here it's like, here's my thing and here are options for doing how you want to do it. So that's really cool to see. I'm honestly just really impressed with it. Despite it being such a low combat adventure and also using the Dice and Logos map, but it's so well organized, it's very well written, and the role playing stuff is really really good. So I'm very impressed with Songs of Aedragard. Let's go over my pros and cons for the adventure. Pro: beautiful layout, absolutely gorgeous looking art on every page. I love the look to it, the font, the headings, everything awesome. Pro: excellent notes for role playing and conversing with NPCs. That full 2-page section that's just new rules of conversation about insight and learning people's wants. All the NPCs in Dramatis Personae have their wants and desires and needs. That helps a lot with an adventure that's focused specifically on role playing and conversing with your NPCs. In fact, there's actually a section where when your players long rest, they get a chance to talk further with their allied NPCs, which is also great. Pro: that flowchart for Chapter 1 is incredible. That features multiple paths of scripted encounters. That is perfect. I absolutely will probably look at organizing my random encounter sections exactly like this because I think it's really, really cool to see it where you try to balance all the different role-playing, exploration, and combat encounters, allied NPCs, all that stuff, but also give the players that freedom to choose how to handle each one, and that can then lead them to other scenes. Pros: multiple endings and epilogues depending on character choices and successes. I always like to see good endings incorporated, and this one definitely does that. And pro: notes for incorporating the adventure into published campaigns and other settings, which is very cool to see. That, of course, we would use these either in official campaigns or you can plop that castle into whatever area you want, or even don't use a castle, use something else. But the bones of the adventure are what is what matters, not the actual specific elements of each one. Although I do think those elements are good. Cons: the Dice and Logos map for the actual castle and the ruins underneath, I am not a fan of at all. Although, as I mentioned, it's a bit less of a problem here because it is not a combat heavy adventure by any means, but those are not maps that I like to use on my virtual tabletop. The other con is that the organization, as much as I do love the scene organization in Chapter 1, it does not work well for scenes Chapter 2 and 3. Those needed to be organized by location. It's just too confusing to try and look at them by scene and then figure out where the hell does this actually take place. Final verdict: Songs of Aedragard is a beautifully written, low-level adventure that focuses on role-playing and storytelling in a haunted castle. Thank you to everyone for watching this video review. You can see my written review at roguewatson.com. You can support my work at patreon.com/roguewatson, and you can follow our own D&D adventures here on my YouTube channel. Thank you.